let's talk about X1 Isle of Dread by David Cook and Tom Moldvay. These are for, well, Dungeons and Dragons Basic Expert. They were the model expert adventures included in the expert set for many years by the writers of Basic and Expert, Cook and Moldvay. And they are tooled for character levels 3 to 6 or 3 to 7. I guess you're trying to end up around 7 there. At which point, in basic expert terms, you're pretty high level. You know, the game begins to wobble after that point. But these are classic. This is a classic adventure. There are two versions, you'll notice. There we go. That's the original 1981. That's the 83 reprint with new, mostly inferior art by Tim Truman. The difference is, quickly, that basically this is, there are, I think, some typographical errors introduced in this. I couldn't find a list, but from memory there are. The big things are that there is a small map included that is needed by the player, really, by the DM, which is not in this, to clear up a confusing location. It's relayed out. There's, for instance, there's more consistent and coherent numbering schemes on the big dungeon that's in it. The wilderness map the players get and their clue are in colour, and there are more maps, in fact, in general. I think, I'm pretty certain. There's two versions of the known world map. There's a map of the pirate lair. There's a map of the village of Tanaroa. 3 versions of the known world, in fact, I think. And there's a map of the city of Threshold. So you get a lot more stuff about the start of the adventure, and you get some helpful extra maps. Beyond that, they are very, very similar. Even the introductory section is basically the same, despite the kind of expanded details on it. You are pointed to the expert set if you want to get more about Karamakos. Expert set and Isle of Dread are where Mystara basically is created, the setting Mystara. The known world, the basic set, I guess, is where Karamakos is created, and Isle of Dread is where you get your first ever map of the known world, which, let's find one of the versions in here. There's 2 of the maps you get for parts of the known world. For instance, yeah, map 2 is the lands and environs of the D&D wilderness, which is not, in fact, the Isle of Dread, but it is, of course, useful if you're going to be taking your characters back there, or if they have just finished some basic adventuring and they want to go out and adventure in the world around Karamakos, I guess. This is inspired very clearly by things like Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost World and Pellucidar by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and somewhat Tarzan, I suppose, and other jungle exploration fiction and science fiction. So maybe a bit of H. Rider Haggard on the edges, maybe a bit of A. Merritt. You know, this is very much in a pulp fiction tradition, but not the same one as Conan or Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. For Conan, certainly, and for some others, you could see an inspiration for I1, as well as The Forbidden City by David Cook, and B4, The Lost City by Tom Moldvay. They're the lost and decrepit and decadent places. This is more, here's a jungle island. And the adventure is really set into that. Well, one thing says this is expert and it's a wilderness module, and the two are connected because BX, and indeed this is the same with AD&D, are really designed on the premise, when you look at the tables, when you look at the adventures provided usually, that, and the model of what first and second levels are in AD&D, which is in some ways a tutorial stage, a training stage for the player. And it can be fun, but I mean, it definitely is a training stage for the player. And it's common practice, including by Gary, to have players start at 3rd level if they were a bit more experienced. You see that replicated in 5th edition in a not completely incompetent way, given the significant design problems in 5e. The idea that the biggest problem is actually that you level out of them so quickly. You're not really meant to stay in them, and you don't really learn. You don't have much time to learn much, especially with milestoning. 2 sessions later, you're a 3rd level character. But yes, wilderness is dangerous. You start in the dungeon functionally, and the idea of a dungeon on the outskirts of the village is common. So T1, the moat house, is a couple of miles away from Homlet. The moat house is maybe slightly a second level dungeon really, but like it's very close to the village. N1, the bad guy layer is very close to Orlane. Is that? There's the Shattered Circle by Bruce Cordell up on the hill there, where the menhirs are. That's where the thing is. This is common. The idea there's a dungeon near the village, and you go there, and that is the first adventure you do. There are some. One thing that strikes me, I was just thinking as I was reflecting on this, of course, is that a thing that you don't see. It's not necessarily super well explicated and demonstrated. What the point of those levels are, that you're not even, your third level by the time you're regularly in the wilderness is an assumption of BX, and it's not a bad one, but it's not something which is necessarily explicated in all the materials relevant. Otherwise, I was calculating you'd need to, assuming fighter XP as the base, and assuming that you get half the treasure in a gold for XP game like BX is, or like AD&D, combat XP is part of it, but it's gold for XP. You're going to want 6,000 to 8,000 gold per character, depending on exactly your maybe 6,000 if you're having a combat budget in there as well, which is more important probably in BX. And so you can kind of see this, this kind of the fact that you're meant to be there in low levels, and probably the dungeon is meant to be reasonably extensive. It's not always. Otherwise, you need to then travel in the wilderness. In the wilderness, you're suddenly being attacked by griffins. Yeah, there's encounter distances and there's stuff like that. But if you're in woods, it can be a very short encounter distance. Ambushes are easy in woods. If it's in the open area, then aerial predators have a very good chance of being able to just follow you and dive you. It's something for slightly tougher characters with second level spells, which magic users have in BX. Clerics don't. Clerics have to be 4th level. So yeah, there's a sort of a dynamic there, and here you are the hook. There's a few hooks given, and a basic hook given with some details and options, and then 6 ways of getting to the island, which is all perfectly functional. This is after a short description of the known world, so again the first description of the known world as well as the first map, and basically the idea is it 6 or is it yeah 4 options, which could be a loan, could be a inherited boat which they'll have to pay tax on, buying an old decrepit boat which might sink, or a merchant splitting the profits. So they're all things where the player has options perhaps, but maybe it's fun to offer a couple of these options to the players, but there are costs each way. And the idea is you're going to go to this tropical island and maybe try to find some treasure there to pay off your debts or to open a new trade route. This is far to the south of the rest of the known world. There are 3 wandering monster tables split up by zone, which if I'll get out the DM version of the... I was going to say, yeah, there is a Tanarua map in the blue version too. Yeah, you can see there. That's the main island, and there are a few islands around it, and there are some other islands off the map, bigger islands. But there's a main island with a peninsula. This is significant. And then a southern area south of this river and the central plateau, and then the central plateau in the northern area. And there's different encounter tables for the peninsula and the south centre and the west, and the north and the northern islands. And essentially, you're exploring this, and you're not necessarily starting off with much in the way of objectives, other than you're going there to find out what's there. But you're obviously going to pick up information, rumours basically, about what else you could find out there. And the southern section is this south of the wall at the mouth of the peninsula, beyond which there are monsters. Very good wilderness trope. You've got this group of 7 villages, including Tanarua, at the wall, and these are a confederation. It's quite thinly populated, just over 2,000 people, but I guess heavily populated for the context. And this is a place you can trade. If you brought trade goods, these people want to trade with the outside world, but don't have ships that can go far enough. Other people do, and sometimes visit the islands, but they don't. And you could make friends with them by trading. You can make friends with them by doing missions. There is a suggestion in the further adventures, which in a way maybe almost should be at the front. Further adventures on the Isle of Dread should maybe be at the front rather than the back, but it's at the back. The first is destroy the zombie master. The idea of this kind of cult on the peninsula of people raising the dead, and you've got to go down into a graveyard with tunnels and unwholesome creatures at the centre of which is the zombie master. There are other potential adventures too, like killing off the pirates who are there, hunting dinosaurs, bringing back interesting beasts, hunting sunken treasure, mapping the island, and these connect encounters both fixed and random in the main wilderness. But the southern section has far fewer kind of big monsters, and the encounter table is more undead heavy due to it is undead heavy, whereas the rest of the place is not. There are also things like dryads and living statues and lycanthropes somehow. That southern central section is a lot of intelligent beings, and then some beasts, and then in the north you're beginning to get some prehistoric animals, the megatherium and the mastodon and the saber-toothed tiger and the titanothere. And then in the northern section there are dinosaurs, including the T-Rex, for instance. There are dragons, there are giants, there's plesiosaurus. So there's a much more dangerous biome in most respects. I mean, you get level drain undead down in the south, which in BX is pretty brutal, even compared to AD&D where it's brutal. But in general, the northern section, that more mountainous section, which is really the objective because you're travelling north, or maybe you're sailing around a bit, but most naturally you're going to travel north through on their trail that they have. You're going to head in there and you'll meet slightly progressively higher HD enemies, generally speaking. Then there are 26, is it? Something like that, or 24 wilderness encounters. By that I mean kind of fixed. I think they'll describe as encounters possibly, or something like that. Yeah, main island encounter areas. And there's a massive variety. There are, in Expert, there are overland travel rules, and those are some largely replicated in Old School Essentials if you're looking for a modern retro clone that's tidied up, easier to get. So yeah, you can travel. Each hex has a cost in movement points or whatever in terms of speed, how many miles it takes, or kind of how many you can do a day, I think is off the top of my head. So yeah, you can, because movement points is AD&D if you're using a hex map. But yeah, so you travel through. There are different biomes. The biomes don't really connect to the Wandering Monster table, though you are told to consider replacing nonsensical encounters, but mostly, I mean, yeah, there's jungle and hills and a lake and mountains, and swamp. You can generally fit most of these encounters into most of these places, but bear that in mind. Once you're in there, yeah, there's just beyond the wall, as you get into the more dangerous areas, the nearest things are some at the peninsula itself, which is quite narrow, like the neck of the peninsula. Bull sharks might attack you. You could go out and dive for pearls, but there's sea snakes there. There are a couple of areas, one in the south, one in the north of the island, where there's just always random encounters if you stay there. There's rock baboons with treasure, 2,000 treasure. In treasure for 15 rock baboons, HD2. That's like a pretty small treasure, but it's and those are, though they are neutral because they're non-intelligent, basically, they're semi-intelligent maybe. They are obviously, you're not going to be really interacting with them very much. There's a giant squid out. This is one thing you're expected that you're going to be sailing around. There's a giant squid there. There's a sea dragon there, and there's a hippogriff nest on this island here, and a pirate base here. So the fact you've got a boat, you're going to be sailing around as well. But initially, I guess you're unlikely to do that. You're more likely to go across. But this is part of the wilderness dynamic, that you are travelling in the ocean. There is no ocean encounter table, but I feel like there probably is an Expert. Is there? I don't actually have the Expert set. I have OSE. So yeah, take that as you will. But you'll go, yeah, you are, and this is one of the things about the sunken treasure, both the squid and the sea dragon, right at the top of the map, the most dangerous monster probably on the board, have sunken treasure deposits. You know, they're in their lair, there is a bunch of stuff you can go and loot. So you're going to need potions of water breathing, spells, etc. There are therefore some antagonists too. There's the monsters, but there's also the pirates who are here as slavers basically, and raiders, and probably it'd be good if you went and got rid of them, but there are lots of them. There are 41 pirates with 4 ships. They do have, say, 10,000 gold. The tribe's treasures are worth a total of 10,000 gold. This is a different thing, weighing about 10,000 coins. That's incredibly lazy, isn't it? But yeah, the pirates have a decent treasure haul. Say the main cave has 1,300 golden gems, a magic user / elf scroll of shield, a sword +1, which is intelligent with detect metal and levitate 3 times a day. Like there's decent stuff there. That's I'd say a fairly challenging fight if you catch most of them at home. But if only the guards are at home, then you can actually do a pretty effective raid, and that's probably what you should be doing. In the main section here, you do have a lot of tribes you can negotiate with, intelligent, non-chaotic creatures is what I'm thinking. The Ricasters, who are neutral catmen, the Thanatons, who are lawful flying squirrel men, the Lizard men, who are neutral lizard men, and the Neanderthals, who are lawful, and who are reasonably civilized, actually, in terms of what they've built, and they've made furniture, things like that. They are not kind of just meant to be idiotic cavemen. So you've got these 4 tribes, of whom the lizard men, I think, raid the Neanderthals. Other than that, they're not necessarily all antagonistic or anything to each other. The Ricaster like fighting, but they're not, I don't think, at war with anyone or anything. So yes, you might end up fighting the Ricaster and the lizard men. You're more likely to fight. The Ricaster are aggressive. The lizard men are also aggressive, and particularly they're raiding another tribe who you could make friends with. But you could make friends with all of them, and there's not actually. I should say the general description is it's heavy, but not over heavy. You know, you'll have the rock baboons is 3 paragraphs. The sea snakes and pearls is 1. The pirates is a column. The Ricaster is most of a column. The Thanaton is most of a column, for instance. You know, you're getting enough detail for small settlements here, so I can cope with that for those 3 as an example. You don't generally want, if you're talking about, you know, I don't think there's much value in having a 2-page spread on the caves of the rock baboons. You find in 5e books that, especially because of the even higher art quotient in terms of page count, doesn't matter for word count, I guess, but you end up with 2-page spreads on minor locations, and often of that, you know, it's about two or three. It's like 3 columns of text and 2 large bits of art, and that's a pointless use of space when you can get it done more efficiently. It would be nice perhaps to have more detail on what these inland tribes want. These kind of humanoid, demi-human, whatever, the Neanderthals human, I guess, tribes want, because other than the Neanderthals probably want the lizardmen to stop raiding them, because they are obviously interactable, and you don't get much detail on that. There is also, in that central section at 14, so the furthest away, if you're doing an overland up here, there's harpies there. Oh no, there's gargoyles, sorry, there, and Aranea there. Aranea are a chaotic humanoid, so obviously these 2 are much more go and destroy them. The Aranea have bugbear servants as well, but they are magic using spider people, just spiders, giant spiders really. Evil, nasty big spiders are cool, and you're going to enjoy almost certainly having to destroy them. There is a cursed shield in their treasure, but they have a decent amount of treasure. Not amazing. Again, you know, you're assuming you're purging these guys out. You're going to get a potion, a broom of flying, a couple of potions, one of which is a potion of poison, a scroll, decent scroll. Yeah, like they don't have, as I say, necessarily an enormous amount of treasure beyond. This is the relevant point, I guess. there is a treasure type, you know, so you can populate their individual huts, I guess. The other tribes have a single, this is the thing in terms of layout, the others have a single list of their main treasure. And then you're getting into the more dangerous area. So here you've had wilderness encounters, which are very dangerous because they can just be very deadly even to a third level party. If you're sailing, there's more danger, i.e. hippogriffs, pirates and a giant squid. Sea snakes over here, which aren't insanely dangerous. They are poisonous, so they are quite dangerous, but you can get rich there. But as you come through here, you negotiate with tribes, you deal with encounters. There's a few kind of sort of icon encounters. Oh, bull sharks attacking you, or suddenly the wilderness is dangerous. And then you have, at the end of that, you know, if you're going overland, you will end up, and you may not ever go to the Gargoyles overland, that might be one you land for, because that's in a very awkward place on another peninsula, you can see. Then you will fight these Aranea probably. Then you're crossing north of the river, and therefore into the more dangerous, relatively speaking, more dangerous zone with lots of dinosaurs, and increasingly unpleasant things like rocks, albeit rocks with a treasure map, worth 17,000 gold. Well, as in worth, the treasure is worth 17,000 at Hex 19, where the Ankylosaurus is. There's a deranged Ankylosaurus with 7 HD. There are 5 ogres, which isn't a crazy challenge if you're 5th level, but obviously you're still talking about something where they're moderately tough and they're going to hit you hard. Dimetrodon, who is attacking a native of the island. There's a green dragon, HD 9. There's a layer of 17 troglodytes. Now, the trogs and the ogres, you think you've probably picked up a couple of levels here if you're going back, and depending on your leveling rules, but especially if you're going back to Terranova, or you're one of your allied humanoid tribes. But yeah, you know, they're not going to be super challenging, but they're another bump in, and I mean the ogres are only worth 1,200 gold, so they're not really worth the gold. I think it's that there is a burial chamber beyond them, which is where that gold is. So that's probably not worth it. There's a judgment call there, isn't there? You know, how far do you just try to cow them into giving you treasure, depending on how powerful you are as PCs. The trogs, similarly, trogs are unpleasant, but again, you should, you know, your party should be able to cleanse them at that point. The plesiosaur, on the other hand, at HD 16, probably, it does inside have a ring of regeneration in its stomach, classic monster treasure inside the stomach. But it's pretty bad. It's a 4d6 damage. It can pull someone into the lake. And then there's the sea dragon. So you've got a couple of big bosses out there in the wilderness, if you want to see it like that. But there is an ultimate objective here. It's not just a wilderness crawl. This is part of what I think makes this a superlative, relatively speaking, wilderness adventure compared to many out there, is that it both has a really interesting wilderness, particularly I'd say the southern half, particularly if you add in the recommended undead adventure, you can get a lot of stuff going on there. You've got the very southern part with undead, the central part with a bunch of sailing encounters once you're confident to do that, and lots of potential negotiation as well as dangerous exploration. The northern part is more gribbly, so it's more just here's a bunch of monsters to kill. But you don't actually really have to go into the northern part to cross over into the objective here. And this is what, as I say, steps up from being a good wilderness, and it is a good wilderness, into being a really good wilderness adventure, in that there is a tent pole in the middle. Hexes, by the way, are 6 miles there, for what it's worth, in terms of your mileage per day. The central plateau both is its own micro wilderness, at hexes being 1 mile. And so it is a hex map, and you know, there is an encounter chart, 2 and 6, rolling 2d6 to find out what appears. And these are anything from tough but not insane stuff like boars, 2 wild boars. I mean, cave bears are pretty dangerous. Tremors, saber-toothed tigers. It's Yeah, you're mostly, apart from flying dinos, you're mostly in that central biome for monsters. But yeah, you have a few more encounter areas. There's a tree ant forest. There's a gold vein. That's an obvious thing if you're going there to get treasure to trade. You know, you can make money out of that. There is actually, I should say, if you trade with the natives at the start, there is an XP reward described for the value of the goods. For the first trip you make, you get a XP for the value of the goods or whatever it is, something like that. That's obviously could be seen. My problem with it is not actually that it's not raw, you know, rules as written XP, but that is not necessarily a predictable XP source. It's basically a reward for opening up the trade route. Now that's something you could always say if the player's like, well, what would be the advantage of trading at the start when they're in threshold? They've, you know, done some dungeons there. A merchant comes to them. You could always say, you know, in this game, you get XP for opening up trade routes. In the same way, one of my games, which is not an AD&D game, it's a heavily modded 5th edition game, has exploration XP. You know, players know they'll be rewarded for finding places. XP needs to be somewhat predictable. Players need to know there is a chance of getting something. And so my problem is not that it's story game XP to give trading XP. In fact, the trader classes in AD&D 2 do that. But rather that it's not predictable. The players wouldn't know they're going to be rewarded in that way, and so they can't plan to be good at the game to do that. But yeah, the gold is in a similar vein, obviously, for making money while you're traveling there. There's a cliff wall with a bunch of monsters, and most importantly, there is a village called Mantru next to an island called Taboo Island. And the village Mantru is, I think it's only 50 people. But it's a small village of humans. I guess probably, I feel like they have some ancient connection basically with the island, though they won't necessarily know what it is, what's going on with the island, I suspect. But they nonetheless are there, and they are friendly potentially, or probably. However, there are renegade cannibal villagers who presumably broke off sometime before, who have settled on Taboo Island and in the temple there. And the villagers they would like help, and they will help you if you help them. And it gives you a chance to explore a dungeon. And the dungeon is fairly small. It's not enormous by any stretch of the imagination. Is the map in the map pack, or is it in the... yeah. There, that's quite small. 3 levels, of which the first has technically 8 keyed areas, the second has 8, and the third has 6 or something like that. So we're not talking about a massive dungeon, but it's just a final place to explore. And I mean, it could still take, what, 22 rooms. It could still take a couple of sessions, I think, you know, to explore, especially because it's very dense. There's not really lots of empty rooms and spaces. You are going to be doing something in most of these. On the first level, you're mostly fighting the cannibals, which includes a witch doctor with hold person, snake charm, and cause light wounds. So, you know, they're not incredibly powerful spells, but you don't want to go in there as a 3rd level party with a, yeah. There's interesting information that isn't really pursued, but definitely made me think, like, there are kids there. There are unmarried girls who will flee from you. Yeah, they're chaotic as a tribe, but is there something salvageable there? Is that players will automatically just be like, you know, some of the players might be like, kill them all, I guess, but they're unlikely to. Most players will be like, okay, they're kids. Okay, they're not fighting. Where are these people going to go? And, you know, it'd be nice, again, a bit like with the humanoid tribes, give a bit more of a direction on how to interact with them, even if the main tribe just attacks you. There's reasonable treasure throughout. There's a room with 3,500, like a private altar with 3,500 gold if you get to it at the end of that. The first level, there's the witch doctor has a potion of flying, or rather, whatever their treasure is, a potion of flying and some small treasure in furs. Mostly that's about getting through. The potion of flying is very, very good, though, to be fair. Though remember, you don't get treasure for XP and BX as written. So the point of this here is to be used, not to oh, I want to potentially sell it, you know, and get the extra XP. There are a few nasty traps, like a 4d6 fire trap on the first level, a weakened floor that drops you through, which doesn't give you damage, but yeah, does put you, you know, gets you stuck there until you can find the door up. And in fact, to get through, if you fall through, the next room is flooded. Or, well, no, you don't have to go that way. One of the options you have for kind of going anywhere, which would take you to the stairs, is the stairs up, is via 3 albino mako sharks. So there's some nasty stuff in there, albeit the also in the mako shark place there is an oyster which has a black pearl worth 3,000. So it's, again, it's worth going there. The treasure is pretty commensurate. You know, 3,000 if you're a 5th level character at that point, which I think is reasonable. You know, that's going to be a quarter or something, is it, of your needed XP. So yes, you're going to need. So it's going to be a 16th of your needed XP if there are 4 of you or less. But the point is, it's still going to be a worthwhile thing if you can clear that room. There's maybe not as much treasure evenly spaced throughout the temple on Taboo Island as I'd like, but it's okay. You know, there's a mace +2 in a priest chamber on the 2nd level. Also in the same room, there's 500 gold and 2 statuettes worth 1,000 each, so that's 2,500. That's not a dangerous room either, unless, basically, unless you're swept in via, the room itself is not dangerous, but as it's sealed against water, if you open the door without checking, then you'll be swept into it, for instance. Yeah, there's some diseased giant rats. Not too tough, but very annoying. That encounter is a classic cost rather than danger, as it were, really. And then on the final layer, on the... Oh, there is actually one of the nastiest, in terms of idea traps I've ever read. The fire trap on the 2nd level is that there is a fire trap, which is has a tripwire underwater. But because it's flooded, the oil that's part of the fire trap will spray onto the water, and then it ignites on contact with the water, basically. And so basically becomes Greek fire in the water for you. Yeah, below you've got continued bits of traps. You know, there's a boiling well where you can get precious emeralds. There's a terrace you can slip down because it's so slippy and wet. There's a hidden throne where the kind of mineral calcium encrusted figure has a ring of telekinesis and a sword +2 charm person, but that's also under the crust, albeit therefore undamaged. And there's a Kopru, who is an amphibious humanoid, HD 8+4, HP 44, who has a charm ability and a moderate combat ability. There are 2 Kopru. They don't actually, these guys, annoyingly, do not have any treasure, so you are just fighting them because they are in the area, as in they are in the centre, to be fair. You've got Kopru here and here, so as you're exploring down here, if you want to go, for instance, off D here, you're going to have to clear them out. D is unmapped caverns, which the DM should apparently map themselves, which is fine. This is... you know, this is something you get in Gary modules and elsewhere. You know, down here there's some ghouls. Find this out, or you know, various other modules. You know, this is a place you could add yourself. It is reasonable for a designer not to give you everything they put in the module. This is a judgment call because designers do this badly. Sometimes they don't give you stuff they obviously should. But if it's areas off the main map and they're sending you a 32-page module, and they filled it efficiently, and this is efficient, this is very efficiently written. It's not excitingly written. I'll get, you know, let's go for the caves of the rock baboons. The party is attracted to a crumbling stone cliff by the noise of many loud hoots, grunts and shrieks. The sounds come from a 6-foot-high cave opening in the rock wall. A foul stench wafts out of the dark opening, but all the characters can see is a tunnel leading back into darkness. It's very dryly written. It's completely functional, no complaint there. But if you're making an efficient 32-page module and you don't have space, it is fine to say to people, look, you're the DM, make more. Here, you've got this entire wilderness. You have The pirate base is the obvious secondary dungeon, because the Aranea is much less detailed. But the secondary dungeon place you might go for a specific adventure is there. And then you're told you could also add somewhere in a graveyard, like, catacombs in a graveyard, etc. Or you can add the caverns in the Coprue cave. To finish off, after the extra seeds, adventure scenes, there's some randomization for creating human encounters based on the encounter, and that gives you, including different alignments. This is good. They are good tables. It gives you 3 sample matriarchs and 3 sample war leaders of the 7 villages, so you can have some characters who might help you, or advise you, or even oppose you. And then there's plenty of new monsters, some of which are AD&D monsters: the Allosaurus, the Ankylosaurus, the Dimetrodon, the Giant Elk. Some are new: the Grangaree, which is a hornless rhinoceros giraffe thing; the Coprue, the Aranea, things like that. There are, and the Thanaton and the Racasta, and possibly the Swordbeak, which is a 6-foot flightless bird. It's like an axebeak, isn't it? I need to compare the stats. But yeah, I like the humanoids as extra things. I mean, I think basically, though obviously we can joke about the infinite number of different slightly tweaked humanoids there are out there, more humanoids is fun, partly because it's an exercise in reskinning. You can literally just reskin something else as frogmen or something, or ratmen. But I think just a little twist with an extra rule is good, and it gives you more ideas. You don't want 2 monsters do it. Here, the fact there are 5 5 intelligent, organised tribes in that centre section who are not human, is a very high amount, but I think it creates part of the fun thing there. And it reminds me of some, that maybe you want fewer for perfect design, inverted commas, but for just feeling, so the wonder of the wilderness. Talked about this in a recent podcast stream with Prince of Nothing. The wonder of the wilderness doesn't die out, but I think nonetheless it basically works. I think it's it's a nice mashup. You won't want too much more of it, and you can of course take those monsters out and use them in your own stuff anyway. Once you have the module, once you have the stats, you're like, great, I can just steal from this. These are justly considered classics. They hit the things the wilderness adventure needs to have. It's helpful to have the tentpole, so having Taboo Island as the obvious objective in the final event once you know more about it. It's very generous about its extra locations, particularly the pirates. It has a whole... you can run it as Red Nails or Founding the Federation of Planets, but it's got all these tribes in the middle. It's got places you can expand into, because the BX stuff was meant to have that. B2 has the other locations, which was B1 and B2 were obviously core box set modules, as was the Tower of Xenopus. And the idea with all those was, here's how you get the dungeon started. Now you could add this, and in B2 that's the side locations in the wilderness. In B1 it's just adding stuff to the Caves of Chaos. In Xenopus it's the extra floors, isn't it? So this does that by saying, look, here's extra bits of the wilderness you can add on. It creates wilderness scale challenges as well. I don't just mean the encounters, but I mean, you are going out to trade, you're going out to discover stuff, you can become rich. By the end, if you're 7th level and you've got a bunch of money from trading and you've got a bunch of allies, what if you've got the 7 Village Federation, you've got Mantru, maybe they could, you can see the player who is interested in building, the builder type player is going to start seeing opportunities here, especially because there's no central government here. You're moving into a domain play level. You're not at name level yet, I grant, but you're getting there. BX begins to crumble, obviously, beyond that, really, alas. Play AD&D. But you can see the potential already built into it, which would eventually become CMI in BECMI, the further level tiers. So I highly recommend it as something to read and study and to run. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, so do tell me in the comments, and I'll see you next time.